I speak for the poor in America who are paying the double price of smashed hopes at home and death and corruption in Vietnam. I speak as a citizen of the world, for the world as it stands aghast at the path we have taken. I speak as an American to the leaders of my own nation. The great initiative in this war is ours. The initiative to stop it must be ours. These are the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. from the Trumpet of Conscience in 1967. They are as relevant today as they were then. In a time of potential covert abuse of emerging technology, we need the governments of the people they represent to work together to reclaim the healthfulness and safety of our environment. Thank you.
Today is March 20th, 2011, and we're here with Dr. Anthony Ananga. Dr. Ananga is going to speak with us about his subtopic and section. It has to do with abuse of emerging technologies, a historical background.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chinia, for your introduction. As Ms. Chinia has told you, I'm going to focus more today on the abuse of emerging technologies. And my area of focus today is going to be on biotechnology. It's very crucial for us to understand that biotechnology provides new tools for improving animal health and welfare. It also helps us to increase livestock productivity. It also helps us to increase crop yields. It helps us to develop farming practices that are good for the environment, and also it's increasingly used to sustain agriculture. Apart from the sustainability in agriculture, biotechnology also is very crucial in terms of improving human health in medicine and other practices. It's very crucial to understand that since the development or the discovery of DNA by Watson and Crick, and also the discovery of recombinant DNA, as well as the de novo gene synthesis, all these are technologies that have helped to advance science and technology. But it's very crucial to understand that the benefits of biotechnology also comes with potential risks. And these are some risks that need to be addressed so that we can help to improve human health and also environment. When you talk about potential health and risks in biotechnology, I want to focus more on major issues, that is biosafety and biosecurity. Okay. The risks that are posed by biosafety and biosecurity needs to be properly addressed in different contexts. And when you talk about biosafety, you're talking about pathogens and toxins that are engineered by biotechnologies that can accidentally harm the general public. Can harm plants and animals. It can also harm our environment, like public waters and public lakes, public rivers and public lakes. And also, there's a potential threat for individuals who work in the lab that can be exposed to some of these risks. So that's the context of biosafety. And when you talk about biosecurity, we are talking about some of these toxins and pathogens getting into the hands of those who can deliberately harm or misuse this technology to harm humans, to harm environment, and also to harm plants. So with all those two issues put together, that is biosafety and biosecurity, there are levels of concern. There are levels of concern when it comes to biosafety and biosecurity. And one of the concern is that products that are not known to consistently cause disease in healthy individuals may eventually do so. Okay? That's one reason. Another thing is that the second concern is that hazards from ingestion or the exposure of dangerous or mutated pathogens can also they can also cause they can also be hazardous to human lives. And thirdly, there are indigenous or exotic agents with potential for aerosol transmission. When I talk about aerosol transmission, I mean airborne transmission. And fourthly, dangerous or exotic agents which pose a higher risk of life-threatening diseases like aerosol transmitted lab infections or related agents with unknown risk transmission. With all those put together, is crucial to it's crucial to make some recommendations. And at this point, having highlighted the potential of biosafety and biosecurity, I would like to make few recommendations. First of all, under biosafety, we as scientists must improve the principles and practices for the safe handling of and containment of recombinant DNA. Second, under environmental safety, the government should continue to revise the guidelines for research involving recombinant DNA technology to address the use of biotechnology in agriculture, in medicine, and in other fields. And lastly, under biosecurity, there must be a strict control on access to pathogens considered to be most dangerous and amenable to the agents of bioterrorism. Thank you, and any questions?
Yes, Dr. Ananga, I have some definitional questions for you, just so you can give us some definitions for the general audience to follow.
Yes.
Can you first tell us what is biotechnology?
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, that's a very common question. Biotechnology refers to, it's a field of applied biology that involves the use of living organisms and bioprocesses in engineering technology, medicine, and other fields requiring bioproducts.
Okay, can you tell us specifically what is food biotechnology?
Thank you. Food biotechnology refers to the application of technology to modify genes of animals, plants, and microorganisms to create new species which have desired production, marketing, or nutritional related properties. And in most cases, people talk about genetically engineered foods. So,
Can you tell us what a food biotechnologist does?
food biotechnology is used biotechnology tools to improve food production, food sustainability, and also to promote healthy foods.
Could you tell us also what is molecular genetics?
Say that again?
Molecular genetics?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Molecular genetics simply refers to a field of biology and genetics that studies the structure and function of genes at a molecular level.
Okay, and what does a molecular geneticist do?
A molecular geneticist employs the methods of genetics and molecular biology to improve health, environment, and in terms of research in plants, animals, and other organisms.
Okay, can you tell us what is meant by DNA and specifically recombinant DNA technology?
DNA refers to deoxyribonucleic acid. It's a nucleic acid that contains the genetic instructions that are used in development and functioning of all living organisms. And when you come to recombinant DNA technology, it refers to the process of joining DNA molecules from two different species that are inserted in a host organism to produce a new genetic combination that are of value to science, medicine, agriculture, and industry.
Thank you. Would you tell us what is a de novo gene synthesis?
A de novo gene synthesis simply refers to a system that enables you, for example, to tailor a natural or individually designed gene to your specific needs.
Okay, would you tell us what is meant by biosafety and also biosecurity?
Yeah, those are very crucial points. When you talk about biosafety, for example, when you talk about biosafety, you're talking about the prevention of large-scale loss of bio-integrity, focusing both in maybe ecology and also in human health. And when you refer to biosecurity, biosecurity is a set of preventive measures that are designed to reduce risk of transmission of infectious diseases, quarantine pests, and invasive alien species, living modified organisms.
Okay, would you tell us what is meant by a pathogen and specifically a mutated pathogen?
A pathogen is an infection agent. It's an infection agent, or more commonly is called a germ, or a biological agent such as viruses, bacteria, fungus, and all that causes diseases. That causes diseases to a host. when you refer to a mutated pathogen, you refer to a pathogen that the genomic, its genome has been changed, or the DNA has been changed through a process of mutation.
Okay, and is that specifically the meaning of a mutated pathogen in that regard?
Yes, in simple terms, in basic terms, yes.
Okay, and then what is the difference between an indigenous agent and an exotic agent?
That's a very good question. When you talk about indigenous, you're talking about pathogens that are common in a given environment, while exotic refers to pathogens that are imported or exported to a new environment.
Okay, and then I have two more questions with regard to definitions for you. One is, what is aerosol transmission?
Aerosol transmission means simply means airborne. In other words, there are suspensions in the air, or in a gas form, or a solid or liquid particles, or small enough that they remain airborne for prolonged periods of time that can easily be transferred to humans.
And just to clarify, I think what is meant is, for example, by breathing it in?
Exactly.
Okay. And then last, could you tell us, there was a phrase you used in your slides, what is meant by amenable to use in this context?
Yeah, amenable to use basically just mean ready to use. For example, there are some pathogens that have been genetically modified that can be easily used, readily used. So when you talk about amenable to use, you're basically talking about ready to use.
Okay, and just to clarify again, if I understand, the issue is that it could be used readily in either a positive, healthful, or a detrimental way?
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's why we are strongly recommending that there needs to be a process whereby there needs to be a process whereby there's strict regulation in the use of biotechnology as a tool to improve human health, plant health, as well as other organisms.
Okay, I really understand. I really appreciate you also taking the time to define these terms for us, because it's new to a lot of people in the audience. And thank you so much, Dr. Ananga, for spending time with us today.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad to be with you.
Today is March 2nd, 2011, and I'm very happy to be joined by Dr. Robert Duncan, who is an expert on some of the technologies that are being abused covertly, and he's going to speak with us about that today.
I am Dr. Robert Duncan. I have degrees from Harvard University and Dartmouth College in artificial intelligence, robotics, and business. I have worked on projects for the Department of Defense, CIA, and Justice Department in my career, including writing the artificial intelligence code to track the Soviet nuclear submarine fleet. I have researched advanced surveillance and weapon systems that attack the human nervous system for the last 6 years with a consortium of unnamed scientists called the Mind Hacking Strategy Group. We report the abuses of science to the public. Interviewing over 650 targets in the United States and conducting experiments, we were able to classify and reverse engineer much of the technology that targets a weakness in biosignaling of nerve cells. These weapons are being used on a mass scale, invisible and intangible, except to the people and populations being subjected to them. These weapons are a new breed of weapons of mass mind destruction used for interrogation, no-touch torture, brainwashing, and programming of Manchurian candidates. The disrespect and dishonor of the Department of Defense and CIA for their countrymen has reached new dangerous levels. from Secretary of the Air Force, Michael Wynn, saying that we must test microwave weapons on Americans before we use them in war, to the CIA's MKUltra experiments continued under new names. We must remember that those safeguards to protect liberty may ultimately be the ones that take it away. Every science from nanotechnologies to mind control are eroding America's ethics and morality by testing them on non-consensual subjects in the public. Weaponization of technologies that attack the very soul is unconscionable. Any country that pursues these technologies and are willing to use them against their own citizens will perish under the burden of the injustices. A draft government report says that we will alter human evolution within 20 years by combining what we know of nanotechnology, biotechnology, IT, and cognitive science. The 405-page report sponsored by the U.S. National Science Foundation and Commerce Department calls for broad-based research programs leading to machine-to-human communication and enhanced intellectual capacity. Let us create a world worth living in, for which the moral conscience of our society is by what we are remembered.
Thank you, Dr. Duncan. Today is March 7th, 2011, and we're here with Dr. Warren. He has several degrees, and he is the director of the Bioethics Center at Tuskegee University. First of all, could you tell us the full name and the intention of the Tuskegee University Bioethics Center?
Yes. The full name for the Bioethics Center is the Tuskegee University National, and I emphasize National Bioethics Center in Research and Healthcare.
And are there other parts of the center or programs within the center throughout the U.S.?
Not connected with Tuskegee University, but there are other bioethics centers that have been ongoing for several years, and most recently funded by the National Institutes of Health.
Okay, and if I remember correctly, I understand that this particular center was partly developed in response to the presidential apology to the people that were targeted by the Tuskegee syphilis experiment?
Yes, this center was actually mandated by President Clinton in 1997 as a part of a presidential apology for the U.S. Public Health Service SIFTA study at Tuskegee. And he mandated this center as well as a museum to continue the legacy that occurred and to prevent such atrocities from occurring again.
Can you tell us if there's any survivors of this experiment?
At this time, all the survivors, all the men, have passed.
I understand, if I remember this correctly, were there also people that were infected as a result of the direct experimentees being infected, their partners?
That we don't know. There's some evidence, but to speak to that specifically, I would rather not.
Okay.
We've directed our attention to the men and their families.
Okay. Did they all die as a result of the experiment?
We don't know for sure. Some of them passed from other causes, and so again, that's more of a scientific question that more opinion than facts.
Okay. Can you tell us what value does an apology by the U.S. President at the time, President Clinton, carry?
An apology from the president, the highest official in the country, sends a very strong message to the nation that what the country did was wrong, morally wrong, and we want to recognize that error and make the appropriate corrections.
Okay, when I was reading on the site for this center, I was reading about addressing some of the damage to the public psyche. So could you tell us what has been some of the damage to the public psyche?
In my view, the loss of trust in an institution that's supposed to have the best interests of the nation at the forefront. So the fact that you've lost trust in the most important agency and the government agency allows and requires a lot of work to be done to restore that trust, particularly in the African American community, where there's been a history of wrongdoings on our behalf.
Now, I understand that they have some training programs from the university for healthcare providers. I was wondering if you could tell us what could potentially be taught in those programs that may prevent more unethical and non-consensual human experimentation.
Well, we're really trying to launch the center's activities, and it's been around for 10 years, in 3 areas: research, education, and service. We believe that we've got to challenge the ethical, bioethical, public health ethical presuppositions that initiate the study. And then once we've done that research, to begin to teach what we've learned, and hopefully that translates into practice at the federal, state, and local level.
And what about internationally?
Of course, internationally as well. But an injustice globally is an injustice locally, and an injustice locally is an injustice globally.
Globally as well.
As well.
Yes, I would agree with that. I wanted to ask you, just how do you think that such activity could have, and in fact did, take place for so long, 4 entire decades, despite what I would consider to be most people's unwillingness to carry out such activity?
First, I think we must recognize that the exposure to what was going on did not occur in the scientific community. It was a reporter. So it seems to me that the notion of what is right goes beyond the realm of science. And what I think occurred is that in the interest of science, procedures and research was ongoing. And when we look beyond that narrow scope of science, we found there was an injustice that needed to be corrected.
Could you tell us, potentially, I was wondering if some kind of sense of embarrassment of having made a mistake might be something that could have allowed this activity to go on for so long?
I think when we talk about embarrassment, that's at the individual level. And I think we have to talk more importantly about what was the intent at the systemic level. So until we fully understand what the intent was, then it's very difficult to even think about quote-unquote embarrassment. What was the intent by the U.S. Public Health Service to initiate the study, carry it on, and was that intent realized?
I also wanted to ask you, there's an article in the Huntsville Times, and it addresses the Presidential Commission meeting that took place at the beginning of last week. And I was somewhat disappointed because in the article, although they made reference to a serious history of this type of activity, it seemed like they referred to events that happened quite some time ago. And I was wondering what you thought about the delay that seems to happen before the mainstream media will report on this type of activity, even though there's quite some time, even years in advance, that people are indicating and reporting that they're experiencing something going wrong in the system like this.
In my view, we spend a lot of time reacting to an error, as opposed to thinking about the violations before it occurs. It's very different in responding to something that has gone wrong, in opposed to being more proactive. Doing no harm is not the same as doing good. So I think we need to spend more time on deciding how to do good, in opposed to preventing harm.
And finally, I wanted to ask you, I noticed when I was doing the research and looking for a video I would have liked to have seen of the actual apology by President Clinton on whitehouse.gov, the official White House website. I saw when I did a search in there that I could find some results for the Guatemala syphilis experiment apology, but not the apology with regard to Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Do you have any thoughts on that matter?
That apology is available in the public sector, so we can make it available to you, and I'm not sure why you couldn't access it.
Okay, and finally I wanted to ask you, actually, those are all my questions, but was there anything about the subject matter that you would like to add at this time?
Yeah, I think it's important to really begin to verify the intent. We're still unclear about what the intent was, and also to be clear that like no other place in the country, Tuskegee University was mandated to address this issue, and the Bioethics Center should continue with that mandate.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Warren, for meeting with us today and sharing some opinions about this. This is a difficult, complicated subject that most people do not have good expertise on, and this is something that you have a lot of experience with in your role in your research, and I really appreciate you coming to talk with us today.
Thank you very much.
My name is Dr. John Hall. I'm a medical doctor from Texas. I'm an anesthesiologist and chronic pain management physician. I'm a diplomate of the American Board of Anesthesiology, a member of the American Society of Pain Medicine, and also a member of the Mind Science Foundation. I recently spoke at the Presidential Commission for Bioethics. As you know, President Obama sent a memorandum to Amy Gutmann, the chairman of the Bioethics Commission, regarding two things. After the apology that was offered to the people of Guatemala for performing a Tuskegee syphilis-type study on their people, President Obama has charged the Commission with answering two questions. Is current legislation adequate in protecting the public from non-consensual, unethical experimentation? And is any such experimentation still ongoing in this country or abroad? On March 1st, I testified to the Commission to both of those questions. With regard to current legislation, the Federal Code of Regulations regarding human subjects testing is also known as the Common Rule. The Common Rule has several flaws, mostly that have to do with informed consent. If you look back at our country's history on doing experimentation on people without informed consent, such as experimentation at Willowbrook, multiple radiation experiments, the Tuskegee syphilis study, MK-Ultra, MK-Search, and others, the biggest problem with that experimentation was that there was no informed consent. My testimony to the Commission was that the Common Rule is inadequate in protecting us from experimentation due to the loopholes within it that allow agencies to circumvent informed consent of the subjects. Specifically, item 46.116D, items 1 through 4 in that document give 4 different ways that informed consent can be circumvented. One being if the investigating agency feels like no undue harm will come to the subject. One, if they feel that the experimentation will not affect the general welfare of the subject. And most notably, one that states that informed consent may be done after the fact, after experimentation has been done. As you know, with many of these horrendous experiments from our past post-World War II history, that's exactly what has happened. The same as Tuskegee, as with Guatemala, the experimentation was done, but then 40 to 60 years later an apology is offered, often to survivors of the original subjects when many of them have passed away. With regard to ongoing experimentation, as a physician and other physicians in the medical community have been fielding complaints from multiple people complaining of being experimented on with electromagnetic technologies, specifically electromagnetic technology that's meant to alter cognition, alter behavior. I personally have heard from approximately 2,000 victims, all voicing identical complaints. These complaints range from burning of the eyes, burning of the skin, rapid heart rate, severe heartburn or reflux disease, electrical disturbances in their homes, along with a form of stalking called organized stalking, referring to these people being stalked by groups of people unknown to them and for no usual criminal reason or law enforcement reason that you see stalking. I presented a packet of data reflecting this to the Commission, as well as did Dr. Terry Robertson, also had me hand carry a packet of data that he presented to the Commission as well. With regard to this type of experimentation, it appears to be being accomplished by covert groups. In San Antonio, Texas, several victims have identified one such group here as a private investigative agency owned by a former FBI agent and his son, a former lieutenant colonel with the DOD. These people were identified through their stalking attempts, and it's assumed that they are accessing electromagnetic technology that's meant to intrude upon the privacy of the individuals that they're stalking. At the Commission, there were also probably 20 victims that all stood up speaking at the Commission, voicing identical complaints. As I told the Commission, in the medical community, we are the ones fielding these complaints. If it were only a handful of people nationwide, this could be easily written off to other factors. However, each state has multiple victims coming forward voicing identical complaints, which lends itself more to experimentation rather than mental illness or any other cause.
Freedom from covert harassment and surveillance have found that the remote neural monitoring and organized stalking networks are pandemic in the society. Our organization has received calls from every major city in this country and nearly all 50 states. Many thousands are being stalked and tormented by advanced surveillance and mind control technologies, which appear to have been deployed by the U.S. military and the intelligence agencies. There are many similarities to the protocols used. Approximately 85% of our members are single, which seems to suggest that they usually target those that are without an embedded support system. The majority are female and most are unemployed. The target is observed for a certain period of time, and once the victim's patterns are established, then he or she is attacked covertly in every conceivable way, 24/7, whether at home, work, or in the community in which he or she lives. The goal, according to Dave Lawson's book called Stalking, is to destroy the targeted individual or drive the person to such physical and psychological distress that he or she will self-destruct by suicide, homicide, or both.
What is happening in regards to mind control technologies is a major human rights atrocity, and it needs to be exposed and solved. People need to be aware and informed that mind control technologies have been deployed in our cities and towns across the U.S., and that they are amounting to a major human rights atrocity wherever they have been employed.
As a practicing psychiatrist for more than 20 years, I have had the opportunity to work with many different people in many different areas. I have had the opportunity to help people who represent big business. I have had the opportunity to help people who represent government. And I have had the opportunity to help people that represent the health fields and the educational fields, in the public and private sectors of all of these. And it's been my experience that many of these people have experienced technology in such a way that caused them grief or was abusive to their career, to the work they do, or to the work that their business or corporation was doing. And this is the potential for the emerging technologies, is to harm people, their careers, their opportunities. And unfortunately, sometimes when it happens and is put on the internet to the whole world, there's not anything you can do to change or rectify what that technology has done to that person, that business, government, careers, in health or education, or even to the hospitals that I've worked with. And I would hope that someone would thoroughly look into this and thoroughly investigate the different aspects that are encountered by psychiatrists, psychologists, and other persons in the health and health field. Thank you.
My name is Jonathan Cartee, and I'm a lawyer in Guntersville, Alabama, and I've been asked to speak to you today on a topic called bioethics, and I guess in part based on my experiences as a lawyer, I have a few comments to make on that, and the need for both governments and business to cooperate to protect the public. The last 20 years I've worked on product liability cases involving dioxin, PCBs, asbestosis cases, and a lot of pharmaceutical cases where people are claiming injury from these products. Now, most recently I'm working on a case involving injuries claimed by primarily children in the country of Vietnam, relating back to the Vietnam War in the 60s and 70s. And I've been over there 7 or 8 times and have personally seen the unintended consequences of what can happen when products that may be properly designed for their original purpose, such as defoliants used by farmers, can be misused when applied to food crops and put somewhere where human beings would later come in contact with them, either by eating it or drinking the water where it's contaminated. And because of my experiences doing this, I think it's very important for both, not just the United States government, but governments all over the world, to make sure they interact with the companies that design products, whether it's genetically altered grains or defoliant chemicals that farmers use, or in the case of pharmaceutical products, which are made all over the world, and in our country at least, have to have FDA approval. And of course, being a government agency, usually they are both underfunded and sometimes politically controlled. So it's very important for all the countries around the world to work together at the both governmental level and also people who, like ourselves, who are private citizens. If we have knowledge, adverse effects of a drug or a chemical or a seed product, it's important, particularly through the use of the internet now, to share information, that we all bring this to the right people's attention. And one of the things I'm most familiar with now, having done this for so long, is both, in the case of asbestos, a naturally occurring mine mineral, was used for thousands of years, but became most widely used during World War II. And it has a latency period of probably 15 to 30 years between inhaling the fibers and actually becoming sick, and in many cases dying from contact with this product. That's often true with other, say, dioxin, which is the damaging component of Agent Orange used in Vietnam and in other crops around the world by farmers to control weeds. A lot of times the actual medical science is not there until later. And with that in mind, it's more urgent now than ever that we be very cautious, because there are so many chemical compounds that are out on the market now, and sometimes they are rushed to market for financial reasons or other reasons, that the testing is not adequate and they need to be followed up. I've also been aware and worked on cases involving several pharmaceutical products, between cholesterol medicines such as Bioethical and Biox, and which is an arthritis medicine, and also sometimes even something now like Yaz, is a birth control pill that can cause, I have a case right now involving a embolism in a young girl. So it's very important that companies, when they develop these products, they do conduct their own studies and they outsource a lot of that, but a lot of times they will bury the negative studies because they want to make money and they want to get this product to market. So that's where, I guess, people outside of the corporate structure and sometimes outside of the governmental watchdog agencies also have to look over both of their shoulders to make sure they do the right thing. Or, whether intentionally or not, sometimes it's due to omissions, other times information is intentionally left out that protects the consumer. So that's my short thoughts on bioethics. It's a responsibility we all have, whether we're government watchdog agencies, whether we're manufacturers or corporate reps or salesmen for these corporate reps, or government agencies. So I think we all need to share any adverse information we have on all these type of products, and the governments around the world, particularly with modern technology of communication, need to share and post any kind of adverse effects these and future products that haven't even been thought of might have in the future. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you today. You know, similar to what I said earlier, we don't know sometimes. These products will be approved by the FDA, but the Food and Drug Administration actually does not conduct testing like most people think. They actually allow the companies to outsource to private enterprise the actual testing of new drugs. And all the FDA does basically is review the studies that are not their own. They're not equipped to do that. And so often the big business or any business that's promoting a product puts forth its own studies that they have a financial interest in making sure only the best information gets out there. While the government is technically responsible for policing these new products that are, and not necessarily just drugs or chemicals, but there's so many new scientific products coming out today, whether it's a new light bulb that puts out a new frequency that we don't know the effects, there's new surgical techniques that have to be approved. I just think we have, with modern technology and how rapidly the world is changing, it's much harder for science to keep up with what's changing, because science is causing this change. And I think we all have to slow down, and we all have to be extremely vigilant to not so much police, I guess that's a generic term, but we all have to be carefully examining what's put forth in the marketplace, not just as a consumer, but also for governmental use and sold around the world. One of my favorite examples is tobacco. Tobacco is known to be a harmful drug. Nicotine is called, and smoking. Nicotine is very addictive, and the side effect of smoking cigarettes has caused hundreds of thousands of deaths around the world annually, yet it's still there. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Were you going to say something else there?
You know, there's a balance between what the government can do to regulate products and then what consumers must do to vote with their feet, whether to just have the good sense to not buy a product they know is dangerous to them or others. So, and that's a political question I can't answer, but I think the knowledge needs to be put out there. If something's thought to be harmful or potentially harmful, we all have, we ask our scientists and our researchers and our epidemiologists to conduct the proper studies to make sure the products we use and our children eat and children play with as safe as possible.
Now, are you familiar with any, it doesn't have to be specific if you're familiar in general, with any types of examples where not regulating these emerging technologies and pharmaceuticals and so forth, products that are not yet well tested, not regulating either the use of the products or the testing processes, it ends up being a bad thing for the government and or the businesses?
I can think of one example, a case I worked on a few years ago involving a natural occurring drug called ephedra, and it was marketed at health food stores. Particularly, a lot of people use it similar to caffeine. It's kind of a amphetamine-based effect that gives people energy and is used a lot in weight loss. And there was a company called, I believe it was Metabolife, and it had been alleged that certain people had strokes related to raising their blood pressure from taking this food supplement. And because it's not a prescribed drug, it's a off-the-shelf supplement, or it was at that time, it was not as well regulated. And I'm not necessarily saying that all these supplements need the same kind of regulation, but it should be tested generally for the side effects if they're going to be sold in commerce in our country and around the world. So there's a lot of things out there that can be exempted from governmental watchdog agencies because they fit into lesser categories, and yet they're still huge in the marketplace and used by consumers, and we don't really know the full number because there's no registry for the purchases like there is on DEA controlled drugs.
I understand, and that's a very good point, but I guess I was still wondering, like, is there an example where from the point of view of somebody, for example, especially if this is the case, I think, with big business, if their primary interest is, say, financial profit, is there a situation either in general or specific that you may know about where their failure to ethically regulate their activities may have actually ended up backfiring on them?
Absolutely. The example that comes to mind to me is, and it was many years ago, Ford Motor Company made a car called the Pinto, and it tended to, more so than other cars, burst into flames from a rear-end collision, and this has been 30 years ago or more, and they've corrected those problems, and cars are much safer now. But the litigation stemmed from the fact that a memorandum came out produced by a Ford accountant, which made a decision that they knew they had a recall potential, and if they were going to have X number of people injured or killed based on a cost of not having a small part around the gas tank that might have prevented a fire. And they made a decision to basically, it was cheaper to pay for X number of injuries than it was to go back on the assembly line and fix several million cars. And that's just one example from way, way back. Litigation is ripe with many other examples where it's a cost benefit, and sadly, sometimes a corporation, or even not necessarily a corporation, sometimes a government around the world will make a cost benefit analysis that is maybe harmful to the public, but saves an entity some money. And we don't live in a perfect world. It's always a trade-off. But I believe there are examples that some businesses have gone far beyond what they should have. When they knew a certain product was that dangerous, they had a ethical and a legal duty to bring that information forward. I think when it becomes obvious to a company, whether it's a chemical company or a tire manufacturer, for example, in a product liability case, if they know they have a certain defect, they have a duty to bring it out. And where they hide it, oftentimes it comes out later and they get popped with punitive damages. But sadly, that's after many people have been injured or killed. So I believe businesses have an ethical duty, not just a financial duty to stockholders to make profit, but they have an ethical duty to the consumer who buys their product.
Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Carty.
You're welcome very much.
Now, you said a few terms that I think many of the members of the audience might not be already familiar with, so I'm going to ask you to give us some definitions. What is biosignaling?
That is the systems by which cells in the human body signal each other. They use electrical gradients as well as chemical gradients. And so in this particular context, we're referring to nerve cells. And so this is neurotransmitters and the electrical magnetic potentials between the gradients of the cell wall.
Okay, so does it mean potentially that these signals that takes place inside of our bodies neurologically, that they can be deliberately and specifically affected?
That's exactly what it means.
Is that just something that could happen in the future, or is that something that could potentially be happening now?
That is exactly what's going on now. There are many patents in the patent office that describe this. The U.S. Air Force has a patent. There are many modes of interacting with the nerve cells, from the microwave hearing effect, and even the cell phones we're talking on now. They're finding out increases neuronal activity in that area of the brain. And so these are real technologies that are being used currently on the public.
Okay, now can you tell us what is no-touch torture?
It's a way to cause the person physical harm and pain. No physical harm, but severe pain with no evidence or no trace left. So, for example, one mode of these biotechnology torture systems will we'll use a common one called active denial of service, which makes the subject feel like they're on fire, yet it's not causing any permanent burning of tissue. So they call the use of these technologies no-touch torture because they aren't cutting off fingers, they aren't leaving permanent damage, but it obviously it's having the same psychological effect on the target.
Okay, now I have a question related to that. I've heard of something called ADS, the Active Denial System. That sounds the same. Is that a synonym for the term you just used?
Yes,
okay.
That is.
Okay, and then, go ahead.
Oh, that's a weapon system that the Marines asked to have in Iraq, but was denied by the Department of Defense because it hadn't been tested on the Americans yet. They didn't want any long-term damage from the system to show up later until we fully knew the effects of the system.
And that, I suspect, might be a source of the problem, because how would they bridge the gap between not knowing and then knowing what the effects would be?
Exactly. Who's going to volunteer to be subjected to a weapon system long term?
Okay, now you mentioned that in the Mind Hacking Strategy Group, it includes a consortium of unnamed scientists that are working to help against the abuses. For example, working on reverse engineering, I think is a related term, to try to determine how it's being done so that it can be countered. I'm wondering if they're unnamed perhaps because of pressures, professional pressures by the level of power of the people behind the perpetrating.
Exactly. I'm willing to be the figurehead and take the risk, but the powers that be are very dangerous. So I don't blame them for not wanting to come forward. And as well, you said, the professional pressures. Anyone who gets involved in trying to help be an activist and help their population that may not make the government look good can get blackballed from jobs, and there are just a lot of pressures, and that's the reason they stay unnamed, which I don't blame them at all.
Now, I have some questions. This is based on my looking into some categories that are related that you're particularly knowledgeable about, and I'm sure you have a lot more information than you can share with us very quickly on these subjects, but I was wondering if you could give us like a quick definitional answer about some of these things. For example, what is psychotronic weaponry?
That's a term used to mean any weapons that use electromagnetic frequencies to affect the mind. And so it's been shown from many scientists that under certain frequencies, the brain will entrain its frequency to an external carrier. And so these were originally called psychotronic weapons. They still are, but it's a broad vocabulary of how to refer to these very same set of weapons.
Okay.
That they're there to attack the human nervous system and the mind in particular, and the information within the mind.
Now, I have read something about ELF. I think it stands for extremely low frequency waves, but I don't have as good of a technological grasp as I would like as of yet. Is that, if I understand correctly, are ELF waves a type of electromagnetic fields?
Yes, that just has to do with the classification of the frequencies. So extremely low frequency can be anywhere from 0 to 10,000 hertz. The brain operates below 2,000 hertz. And so some of the qualities of extremely low frequencies is that they penetrate anything. And we use earth-penetrating tomography to get an idea of what the Earth's core looks like using these types of waves. So they penetrate very deeply into the Earth.
Okay, so I'm wondering, I've also read that potentially satellites could be used in this regard, but I'm not sure if that could be, would the people doing this have to be closer to the people they're trying to do experiment on, or could they use something from a distance like satellites?
Definitely this is a global system in all of our research, and this is a worldwide problem. And initially it was developed in a laboratory at what they call near field experimentation, but it is now truly global. And I hesitate to say satellites because there are Earth-based systems that are capable of this, such as HARP and many other large phased arrays. And so I generally don't like to talk about specific sources.
I understand, and I just want to make sure we caught what you said. I think you listed HARP as an example. That's the acronym HAARP that Dr. Nick Bejic talks about?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, can non-consensual human experimentation within the United States actually somehow be legal?
The definition of legal, there are a lot of secret laws that people don't hear about and are never discussed. Certainly they're unconstitutional, and if they were brought up and challenged, they would lose. But I'll give you an example of how sort of wishy-washy our legal system is. Under President Bush, John Yoo and Beebe, the White House lawyers, wrote the famous torture memos. Now, in the memos, they basically say, one, we can torture anybody, and it's not considered torture as long as we don't take pleasure in doing it. So that pretty much opens it up to anything, for any reason. Enemy combatant was a new term that they came up with, where that relieves a citizen of any rights. And that's just a new classification, new kind of marketing. So it's difficult for one to say something as horrific as testing a weapon system on them unknowingly that includes torture and possibly death could be constitutional just from the very basics of that, and certainly immoral and unethical.
Now, can you tell us what is cybernetic warfare?
Cybernetics is a broader term that means the governance of systems. So to govern or to steer. And that's a broad-based term used first in 1947 when it came out by an author, Wilson. And it encompasses any system that you are trying to control. And that can be a government, that could be a set of people, or that could be an individual in their mind and their thought patterns.
Okay, and can you tell us what is mind control technology, specifically on the weaponry side?
That's, again, it's sort of another synonym for cybernetic warfare. So the CIA always has an expression that we're out to win the hearts and minds of people, and that's literally true. The heart's an electrical system too, and so they've been working on remote heart attack weapons using the same technology as trying to hack into human minds. Air Force Colonel wrote a famous paper called "The Mind Has No Firewall," and so if you can bypass the normal processing through the eyes and ears and insert subliminal messaging into a population's head, you can win the war, alter the culture, so there are no cultural differences. And so mind control technology, they have many uses, but it's usually political manipulation as well as interrogation of the very thoughts of whoever they're detaining.
Okay, and this sounds like it's related to the term I was going to ask you also about, which is mind hacking.
Yeah. So mind hacking is a set of techniques used to actually delve into someone else's mind. How do you break them? How do you get them to divulge their secrets? How do you insert thoughts that they think are their own thoughts? And so that's a set of techniques used to hack the human mind. And they're very similar. They use a similar framework as hacking computer systems.
Okay, and then what is mind security?
That would be the study of the reverse, just like computer security. How can you protect the population from mind control technologies? And unfortunately, the mind has no firewall, so this is a field of study that's very interesting to me. How can you block external forces that would alter your very conscience, even at a dreaming state? The one colonel in Army intelligence said in the 1970s, the Russians started beaming psychotronic signals over the United States, and it appeared that it was at 10 hertz trying to subdue our population into being nonviolent. And so we started doing the same, beaming it back at their population. And so even though there are secret psychotronic wars going on, really what we should be looking into are defenses against this weapon and not the offensive uses of the weapon. And there doesn't seem to be much research that I could find on the security of the human mind itself.
There was one term you said, I'm not sure I heard it clearly. Did you say it appeared to be at 10 hertz?
Yeah, 10 a pulsed frequency at 10 hertz. So the low band carrier is at what's called the alpha state of human consciousness, and that's when you're very relaxed and you're focused. They call it the beta wave, in the 12 to 15 range dominant wave of the brain, which is the panic mode, and then you have theta and delta, which are trance states, and then deep REM sleep.
Can you tell us what are directed energy weapons?
That's another broad-based category that a simple laser is a directed energy weapon. They can work in other ranges like microwave weapons, and one can convert their microwave oven into a directed energy weapon with some modification. But it also includes ultrasound. So an example of that would be the lithotripter, how doctors can break up kidney stones inside the human body without pulverizing bone or hurting other tissue. And it just means the focusing energy on a point. And one aspect of this that a lot of people talk about in the literature are called scalar weapons. And all that means is you can use multiple sources and intersect energy at an exact point. So you could have multiple spotlights, and where the spotlights intersect, you're going to have a lot of energy concentrated there.
Can you say that term again? It sounded something like the lithotripter.
Oh, lithotripter? Yeah, it's an instrument used to break up kidney stones.
Is that L-I-P-T-O? Lipto?
Lithotripter. Yeah, I think that's the right spelling.
Okay. And can you tell us what is psychic warfare?
That was another term that was created back in the 60s, 70s during the Cold War as a cover story. Everybody knows what a psychic is. Sort of a mystical person with special powers that can tell the future and that kind of thing. And the actual word psychic means of the mind. So it's mind warfare. And they used that term for a while. There was a Project Stargate the Army ran, and it was meant to make the public believe there was no technology behind what they were doing. They're spying, psychic spying into people's minds without any technology, and that's not the way it actually works. Even the people who were doing it were never told how the technology works. So psychic warfare means to remote view and remote influence another person.
Okay, and I want to make sure I understand the point you made about the term psychic and that part of the term psychic warfare. Was it a way to make people think, whether they were on the side of carrying it out or on the side of the receiving end, to make people think that it was some kind of psychic ability such as telepathy or telekinesis, as opposed to physical equipment like computer-based equipment?
Yeah,
okay.
That's right. And those were the words used back in those days, and the terms, the vocabulary has evolved and changed since then. But they're all related to the same set of technologies, tactics, and strategies of mind warfare.
Okay. Now, what is electronic harassment in the context of military applications?
Okay, that's electronic harassment is a term that I don't like personally. One can think of someone who calls you over and over, telephone harassment. Electronic harassment are people that are targeted usually 24/7 with synthetic telepathy or other types of nervous system changing signals, and it doesn't really give it the importance of how devastating electronic harassment is. And it also is broader based on that. It means tampering with electronic equipment. So radio frequency interference weapons, EMP pulse weapons, HERF weapons, which is high energy radio frequency weapons, they can all destroy electronics. So it's still based on the same electromagnetic frequencies, but different intensities and targeting appliances as well as the human body. So that's the term electronic harassment.
Okay. Now, why does there appear to be organized stalking in accompaniment of electronic harassment?
The stalking, and I'm not a total expert in the stalking, but it does show up in documents, the MK Ultra documents, and other things, as a way to increase paranoia. And it's actually pretty complex. I can't describe why that's necessary, but it allows the person who's being targeted to make bad decisions. They're more influential. They can be influenced more easily. But there are a bunch of reasons that stalking is involved. It's also training for agents for intimidation practices, and that's pretty much it. Intimidation. They want to be seen, but there are a couple other reasons that I don't have time to go into.
Oh, I understand completely what you're saying, because one of the videos I'm preparing to produce is just focused on what they call noisy surveillance, when the perpetrators actually, contrary to how people think of surveillance, where the perpetrators would want to be covert, the perpetrators make sure that the targets see them surveilling them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the exact opposite. They want to be seen. That's the whole point. It's not incompetence. That is actually part of their job, is to be seen.
What can detect such weaponry as the type that can actually affect people's minds?
And that's difficult. The equipment is very expensive. A lot of people say they can see it with IR filters, and I don't believe that's possible. All they may be saying is the interference to their electronic equipment. that you can't actually view it. It's in wavelengths that are not viewable with the human eyes or most equipment. So that's, again, a very complex question.
Okay, and by IR filters, you mean infrared filters?
Yeah, infrared filters.
Okay, and what does the term Project Soulcatcher refer to?
That is the title of my last book, and it was a microchip developed by British Telecom, and it claims it will allow for immortality. It records every signal of the human body, brain, and the rest of the nervous system, muscles, and can be implanted into a baby to record an entire human life. And then they even say that chip could be taken out and put into another baby, and it could replay that same consciousness, if you will. And so that was the idea behind Project Soulcatcher.
Okay, I understand. Now, I have one more question to ask you, and this one is more, I separated it from the other questions because I'm not sure if you would know about this, but there was a report, it had to do with pesticides, that the kind of wording that was used was also under the category of experimentation with regard to humans, and there was a report on how these pesticides were used on people deliberately, and that was sent to the attention of 2 senators, and one of them was Senator Barbara Boxer, and it was for a while up on her official site, but I noticed more recently it's not there, and I've heard some talk about how potentially what was really trying to be done, or at least one thing that was trying to be accomplished by using these pesticides on people deliberately, was to see if it would help somehow with mind control. Do you have any idea about that?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not. There was an effort back in the 70s to isolate the psi gene, as they call it.
Is that PSI gene?
Yeah,
okay.
PSI gene.
Okay.
And that would increase the capability of the sensitivity of humans to electromagnetics. In the 70s, many people were complaining about effects from electrical appliances and whatnot, and the government wrote them off as just saying they're electrically sensitive. Now, I imagine that they are still doing research all the time, but I don't know anything about the pesticide doing it, and I don't really believe in chemtrails that they're spraying the population with anything like that. There would be easier delivery methods if it were necessary, such as the water supplies and other things. That's all I know about it.
Okay. Well, that's all my questions. You've really been very, very helpful. You're very knowledgeable about this. I've been doing some research about these types of issues now for some years, and I think you may be the most knowledgeable person about many of these aspects, especially on the neurological side. I know someone else I've been fortunate to be able to talk with a lot, who knows probably the most about some of the aspects on the psychological side, who's actually my stepdad. He used to work for the FBI, and he's a well-known psychiatrist. He received U.S. President's Physician of the Year award under President Bush, the most recent President Bush, George W. And so I'm going to ask him to follow up on some of the things, some of the leads you provided about the psychological aspects, for example, of noisy surveillance. So thank you so much for your time and your efforts to help people to understand what is happening here as far as some of the negative applications, and the fact that instead these technologies can be used for some positive applications.
Oh, very much so. And I have another book coming out in about 4 or 5 months, and it covers a lot of potentially positive applications once the technology transfers.
Hello, I'm Charles McIntyre. I am a psychiatrist, and thank you for allowing me to share some of my thoughts today with you. I spent 25 years in education before I became a physician. And during my 25 years in education, I never felt any thought that I was being targeted in any way by anyone. And I have been a teacher, a principal, a counselor, a director of secondary education. But when I became a physician, all of a sudden it seemed like that people thought that I had a lot of money, or was making a lot of money. And I started noticing that I was being targeted by different types of individuals that seemed to think that they might be able in one way or another to take advantage of me as a physician. And that can happen in a lot of different ways for a physician. One of my colleagues was actually had a license plate with, he was so proud that he had received his MD. He put MD on his license plate. He hadn't had it on there but a week when he got hit by someone and then sued, even though it was not his fault. But one of the things I wanted to share with you this morning was my introduction to how advanced technology can become and how it can be used to the positive or to the negative. And this started several years ago when a colleague, more or less, filed a whistleblower lawsuit indicating that there was fraud of several different types for us. And although there was no evidence to support that, and there was obvious ignorance on the part of the individual, we were investigated by the whole alphabet in every aspect for 2 years. Now, during this period of time of 2 years, we did not realize that we were being investigated by the alphabet, by everybody in the alphabet. And what we discovered was that we were party eventually to this terrible lawsuit accusing us of everything imaginable, from billing on dead persons to everything else that you could think of. But it was done out of ignorance. Now, the sad and tragic thing was that once the federal judge threw it out of court with prejudice, and it went to the circuit court and was thrown out by the entire circuit court, then we were not able in any way to get this off of the internet. And there was no retraction by the newspapers that we were vindicated, that we were innocent, and to explain in detail why was it impossible for this suit to have happened in the first place. So we felt terribly targeted by this individual and the group that he represented. And during this period of time, a very unusual situation occurred that provided me with an insight into technology that I was not familiar with or aware of. Like most physicians, I had at least one cell phone. In this case, I had two, because in some parts of my state, my cell phone worked very well. In other parts of the state, it didn't work, and I needed to use the other cell phone, which worked in certain parts of the state. And there was one part of the state that neither cell phone worked at all. It was a completely dead zone. Well, during this investigation, my wife and I and her sister and our niece were traveling in our car along about a 40-mile stretch in which there was absolutely no telephone connection at all. No cell phone coverage whatsoever. And during this trip, we had just been informed of another element in the lawsuit. And we were discussing in the car along this dead zone some of our personal feelings. about what was taking place and how it has taken place and how we were being erroneously targeted and how different things had happened that were just completely impossible to believe and for all practical purposes should never have occurred in the first place. So we were discussing our own personal feelings along this dead zone where we have never been able to get cell phone coverage with either cell phone, when all of a sudden my cell phone rang. And I couldn't believe it, and neither could the three persons in our car, including my wife, her sister, and my niece. And at that point, I answered the cell phone. And there was no one on the other end, but the last 2 to 3 minutes of our discussion and the things that I said were played out back to us thoroughly and completely, verbatim, word for word, with the speaker on, which we didn't turn on. And it shocked us. But then when we thought about it, we realized, more than likely, that we needed to be very cautious and very careful about what we said and about the personal feelings that we shared with each other. Because we had complete surveillance on us, and it had to have been by satellite or some other advanced technology. And this was a good thing for us. But it's also very easy to see where it could have been a very bad thing, a very negative thing. It could be used either in a positive way or a negative way. But here we were in the middle of nowhere with no cell phone coverage when all of a sudden our entire complete conversation was played back to us about our personal feelings with the speaker on. Ladies and gentlemen, this was a scary proposition for us. And this was the experience I want to share with you about how advanced our technology can be, how it can be used for good. In this case, it was good, or it could be used in a negative way, which I'm sure you can figure out. Thank you very much for allowing me to come together today and say and share with you these things.
Hello, my name is Sahar Shunair. I am the founding spokesperson of Snowy Oak. It stands for Stop Non-Consensual Experiments on All World Citizens. The purpose of Snowy Oak is to help raise awareness of non-consensual human experimentation worldwide in an effort to help make it stop. I'm appealing to this commission because my understanding is that it was convened to review human research subjects protection, largely in light of the findings of Dr. Susan Reverby of Wellesley College, when, funded partially at least by the government, she was doing research into the files of a doctor who was a U.S. Public Health Service doctor during the time of the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. My understanding is that she was surprised to find that not only had the Tuskegee syphilis experiment taken place with regard to documentation that she found in this doctor's files, but that moreover, additional non-consensual human experimentation had taken place in Guatemala, which is now commonly referred to as the Guatemala syphilis experiment. A distinction should be made that in Guatemala, it has been documented that people were deliberately infected with syphilis as well as gonorrhea and cankers. And something else of note is that the National Institutes of Health had provided a grant to help fund, at least in part, what was done in Guatemala. Some people who are very concerned about signs that there may be some current non-consensual human experimentation taking place internationally have received a letter written by someone who was working previously and has gone back to work for the National Institutes of Health, and in between was representing this Bioethics Commission, the U.S. Presidential Commission for the Study of Bioethical Issues. The letter appears to be discouraging of people to report to the Commission on these matters. And a lot of people have lost hope, but I still have some hope that while it is our governments that apparently end up being found to be the entities that have financially and otherwise supported non-consensual human experimentation, that it is our governments that might step forward and look into these matters, and in fact are the only entities in a position to do so. Therefore, I want to ask this commission to please look at another doctor's files. This is a doctor who held the office of surgeon at the U.S. Public Health Service during the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. I will not name this doctor out of respect for his surviving family and loved ones, because he died in August of last year, 2011. However, out of fairness to the rest of the medical community, I will identify him sufficiently by his roles that anyone seriously looking into this matter further will not be able to confuse him with any other individual. This doctor retired from the U.S. Army with a rank of colonel. Specifically, according to his biography online, he retired from the U.S. Army Medical Reserves, also referred to as the U.S. Army Medical Corps, and he was based at Fitzsimmons Army Medical Center in Aurora, Colorado. The center was renamed after they received a donation. However, it is my understanding that, to some significant extent at least, it may have continued to actually operate as an Army Medical Center. This is now where the University of Colorado Hospital, at Aurora, is located. I am further concerned because, from what I have read, there may have been some overlap, including National Institutes of Health stipend support with regard to the James Holmes case, the person who is now referred to as the Aurora, Colorado Theater shooter. He was, in fact, studying in the field of neuroscience, and that overlaps with the field of greatest concern that align with the types of complaints of people stepping forward currently that are concerned about non-consensual human experimentation taking place. This doctor, in addition to having held the office of the doctor that was based at University of Colorado Hospital at Aurora and Fitzsimmons Army Medical Center, in addition to having served as surgeon at the U.S. Public Health Service during the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, was medical director of University Physicians Incorporated during the more modern non-consensual human experiment that is now referred to as polyheme, the polyheme artificial blood experiment, and was reported on in 2006 by ABC News. The reason this is relevant, that he was medical director of University Physicians Incorporated during this time, is that that is the group of physicians that supplied the doctors to at least one listed, now publicly listed, participating facility that was participating with that experimentation, which is the Denver Health Hospital in Denver, Colorado. Moreover, this doctor appeared before at least one U.S. Senate Appropriations Committee, specifically a committee for foreign assistance. And the complaints that I've been encountering are international. Therefore, I will ask for someone from this commission or to be able to refer to another government entity to please look into these matters and these files, because while it does not seem to be a majority of physicians that would participate in such activities, there does seem to be a pattern where if a doctor is connected to one non-consensual human experiment, it might be found that they are connected to more. And I'm going to ask you, please, on behalf of all the people coming forward that are needing some help from our governments to please unite internationally, since this seems to be an international problem. And rather than looking to blame or to sue, to please unite and look to solve the problems that have been arising with regard to people coming forward and complaining with similar symptoms as referenced by Dr. Hall. Thank you for your time.
This is Friday, June 8th, outside my window. It is almost 10 p.m. There's a nightclub that faces us. The back of